Now we have 25 minutes for discussion, questions, challenges, exchanges, and elaborations and comments. Anyone, please? Yes, please. Professor MUTO?
Well, thank you very much for the clarification about where China is and what China is. I'm almost agitated by Jinhua's passionate account of the Chinese Revolution. I feel that this is a very important topic, China. What is China now? What was China now? Where China is going? I think it's not just one of the topics, but a very, very important topic for the forum of this kind. So I think one morning session is enough, and I hope that the organizers of this conference in the future will set a whole day aside to discuss China. Because discussing China is not just discussing China, but discussing ourselves in the future, present and future. And I want to point out that it has been so already, and it's not simply because China is getting such a big thing, big presence in the world, but because of the value of the Chinese Revolution, as in a certain way a continuation of the Russian Revolution. So we need to view the last century at least, and perhaps the 19th century also as the origin of this trend. And for us, I think it's more and more important to think ourselves and think the present in the context of historical continuity, because the loss of continuity is the weakest point of thinking, philosophies, and so on, of some decades. I'll make a little bit of contribution, to tell it, because I was brought up in Manchuria under the puppet government of the Canton Army, and I passed my childhood there. And actually, I was born 4 days before the Manchurian incident, the same year, 1931. So China was with me as colony, as the dominated territory, dominated people, and Japanese as upper class, as dominator. And looking back, my childhood was under special pressure on me as conqueror, as dominating, as a person belonging to the dominating group. It was comfortable in a way, but it wasn't comfortable because there was some certain sense of guilt when in dealing with my neighbors, with my colleagues, Chinese colleagues, and etc., etc. And so, when in 1949, when the Chinese Revolution really came, it was my liberation also from this, how can I say, pressure on me, pressure on my sons. And so it was only my personal experience, but it's an experience shared by a number of people, intellectuals, who had similar experiences in being brought up in colonies, Taiwan, Korea, and China. So it's for us Japanese. It's a sort of China must be there for Japan to be as Japan. Since long ago, but particularly since the 19th century when Japan Meiji change happened. So I think since China is a big country, and it's not just a country, you have relations with neighboring people, neighboring countries and peoples, and even now. And I think the relationship is becoming deeper and deeper. But I may be wrong, but for the people in too big a country, China or India, the people usually don't, even the United States, people usually don't think beyond the borders. The country is the world. It's like, not exactly like Trump, but Trump is the condensation of the kind of self-centeredness which tends to be shared by people of two big countries. So that's what I wanted to say. And in terms of revolution, Chinese revolution had a great impact. And when the change occurred under Deng Xiaoping, he came to Japan and visited the modern steel mill in Kyushu and said that this is it. And he was very glad. Then all the dismay. Sorry. Okay.
So my question, I think, is probably specifically to Professor Wen and Professor Dai. Professor Wen, you mentioned migrant workers just almost in passing, and you said that they were not proletariat, they were petit bourgeoisie. Now, in terms of Marx's original 19th century categorizations, of course, I can understand where you are coming from in that. But because they don't fit that category, because Marx identified the proletariat as both the most oppressed workers and also the most imbued with the capacity to make revolutionary change. But I think now throughout the world, and I recognize that, again, that migrant workers in China are almost entirely workers migrating from one part of China, mostly into the cities, and that's a term a bit different. But let me expand a little bit more, because I think migrant workers are a category or a class of workers throughout the world now, in all of our countries, as the most oppressed category of workers, if you like, and with very specific kinds of vulnerability to economic and political violence and exploitation and abuse, to sexual and physical violence, and recognize within that category that I'm not a sociologist. I haven't done the studies to know what, perhaps others know, what the specific statistics might be, but I work with Million Women Rise, which I'm actually wearing the t-shirt of today, which raises awareness in Britain and increasingly internationally of the plight of migrant workers within the UK and also in a number of countries and across the world. So we have seen that women within the category of migrant workers have also very specific levels of exploitation and violence against them. And they are workers. They are a fundamental part of the workforce. I don't agree with some analyses that were coming out a while ago that just wanted to call them the underclass, because I felt that that took away from them their, if you like, their agency as workers, and indeed as agents in their own liberation. But I recognize this doesn't fit Marx's 19th century and somewhat patriarchal analyses. So my question really is, so how do you see the role of migrant workers in the economy and also in liberation struggles, both for themselves and, as we've discussed over a number of days, and I particularly have raised in terms of feminist humanitarian movements, their role in tackling the major challenges, such as in perhaps even taking lead roles in major challenges such as the over-industrialization that has led to climate destruction.
I have an English paper, and the title is From Migrant Workers to Proletarian.
Okay, good.
It's several years ago, I mean, maybe 10 years ago, when the International Scholar Society talked about the working class, what the workers' class, the working class struggle in China, and whatever. And I try to give the explanation. I also think MUTO, you mentioned that we must take the 19th century's revolution into our consideration when we talk about 21st century. It's great. You must understand that in the 19th century, when Soviet Union to be the leader of the Third International, they never acknowledge Chinese Revolution as a worker class revolution, yes. They don't believe that the peasants' revolution is belong to the socialism. You all know that, yes? So, but what is that? When we talk about we need to keep our memory of the revolution, what is that? When we talk about the 19th century after the Second World War, especially in the old Cold War, old East Asian area, including of Japan, China, whatever, all carry out the land distribute equally to every rural household. What is that? Is revolution or not? Okay, just put aside, and I just try to make you to think about from 19th century to 21st century, what is the revolution in this developing country? Can we have a very formally to carry out a Marxist class struggle in such kind of peasants population country? At that time, in 19th century, the working class, including of the older, the family members, only less than 5% of the total population in China. Can we have the working class struggle or working class revolution as a leading group, as a leading part of the, especially I think that MUTO talk about the colonization and the fighting between these colonial country and the colonized area. So you may know that at that time, if we talk about the revolution exactly to be claimed as a nationalist revolution, not exactly the socialist revolution. So that is also the debates between Soviet Union and China, especially two big communist parties. So when we talk about the revolution, we need to know what is the revolution from 19th century, from 20th century until 21st century. So that is I need to mention that when we talk about the working class struggle in 21st century, I have another speaking to all the volunteers join our rural reconstruction movements. I said, from the 2003, that year, there is a strike in 5 different places, and then they win the fighting, and the cattle size gave the perfect treatment to all the workers, and then nobody can find who is the organizer. They vanished. Nobody captured. So it means that the workers' class succeeded in their struggle. It also means the workers' class in China now step into the stage to show what they want. It's Marxism. But another side, if you want to do the work in these factories, you want to make them to organize and then to fight and then whatever, based on the Marxism, it will be somehow much difficult. Because nowadays, if you go to do the interview with these migrant workers, you may find that most of them, more than 90%, they don't want to be the working class. They want to be a small business, and they want to do some kind of creative. They want to be a kind of petty bourgeoisie. They don't want to be the working class. That is the problem. So if we talk about the working class revolution in China, you need to first to carry out your field work and then to meet these people and then to know whatever they want. And then we may think about how to implement the Marxism in this 21st century working class in China. So I cannot just directly give you the answer. I think that you can take into consideration. Thank you.
Well, thank you again for 2 very wonderful presentations and wonderful overviews, really, for us to think about. I have a question to both of you. That's not the same question, but it's really to come back to this issue of ecology. I think it's very hopeful that China is embracing, as Professor Wen is talking about, a different kind of ecological development pathway. If China has 20% of the world's population and 10% of that, half of it, is still in a rural environment that has some relationship to nature, as you're saying, that is very hopeful. So I'm interested in hearing more about the content of this ecological development pathway and the role that ecological care and repair is going to take in that. Just recently, Australia was confronted with the fact that we can't export our waste to China anymore, and so that is great because it's really confronting Australia to deal with our own waste and figure out what to do with it. But I'm interested to know with how China is also dealing with its own waste. I noticed that the town you talked about at the beginning is no longer doing plastics manufacturing, but how is China dealing with plastics waste and other waste? And I'd be interested to hear just a little bit more content around what the ecological development is happening, how it's happening in rural and in general in urban China as well. And my question to Professor Dai is this move to a kind of more ecological mode of development a final relinquishing of a masculinist figure of development? This idea that you linked to the kind of industrialization and the kind of figure of the man, the masculine figure. Do you see some hope for a different kind of ecological subjectivity that is perhaps configuring a different relationship, whether there's a more feminine subjectivity or not. But I'm just wondering how this move at a national level, at a macro level, is perhaps being reflected in different ways and different kinds of subjectivities that might be emerging.
Thank you, Katherine. 我理解你的问题哈，我自己那个2003年开始成为中国乡建运动的志愿者，比那更早，我是中国环保运动的志愿者，我一方面我认同于这样的思维逻辑哈，就是说，我们能不能够把女性的生命史、女性的文化，发展为一种未来的资源。OK，但是从另一个角度上说，对我来说，我的女性主义是反对本质主义的性别想象的。我不认为女性曾经或者未来可以自外于文明的结构，资本主义的结构，所以我觉得我的那个对于性别和生态的那个思考是建立在一个前提之下，我觉得我们必须改变今天的这个社会的主导逻辑，而这样的一个主导的发展主义的经济逻辑，尤其是到今天，在所有的新技术的帮助之下，它仅仅是一个化妆成男人的逻辑，而不是一个本质性的男人的逻辑。所以我觉得是必须要改变这种逻辑，而且即使我们不能改变它，它自己也必然要崩溃了。所以现在的问题是，我们能不能够共同去想象一种新的逻辑，一种新的生活和生产方式。我觉得只有在这样的意义上说，一种环保主义的实践才能成为现实，否则在发展主义的逻辑之下，我们永远只是补充，是梦想，是一种乌托邦。谢谢。
So try to simplify is my answer. It's started from the late 1990s. It's not caused by somebody mentally to think that China needs to change. It's caused by 1997 East Asian financial turmoil taking place, and then to make large decrease of the overseas demand, and then to make China facing the big challenge of overproduction, and then China need to change the direction. It means caused by the crisis, not caused by the leadership, and then trying to change direction. Maybe it's not good words. I think that is some mainstream wouldn't like to take it, but it's the truth. And then since the beginning of the 21st century, because of the so-called new economic crisis happened in the United States, a large number of the physical industries moved to China, and then not solve the problem, but enlarge the problem. So China became the biggest industrialized country, and then the biggest pollution country. So that is enforced China to think, originally that caused by the financial crisis in East Asian countries, and then caused by a large number of these industries moved to China, and then 2/3 of the industrial sectors controlled by foreign capital. Do we need that? And you said large amount of this garbage imported from overseas to China. Not only China, but also India. China and India is the biggest country to import large amount of this garbage. It's junks. And then you have junk industries. Whatever this, we do need that or we don't. And so from the 2005, when China became the country with the large surplus industrial and agriculture and whatever, and also including of this financial surplus, means that China facing the challenge not the shortage. Originally in 1990s, maybe that we short of the capital investment, we short of these raw materials, whatever. But in the 21st century, the first decades, very soon, China facing the new challenge is that I mentioned three big surplus: industrial, commercial, and financial. All these three capitals all are surplus. So in first, China got to change. So I said that the change come from the objective challenge, not mentally, not just subjective. And then but subjective is also important. You need to face this challenge. So by that, I think that from the 2007, the central governments have a kind of the 17th Party Congress, and the first raise up a new purpose, that is ecological development, as a kind of thought to change this old direction. Old direction is industrialization, whatever. But it's not easy because I just mentioned there are so many different interest groups. These interest groups all have the representative in the central governments. You cannot exactly change them. And then you change what? You change the party leader. So nowadays, when China emphasizes the rural revitalization as a kind of basic strategy for ecology, for new direction, they need to mobilize the party leaders. So that is a difference with Australia or with other Western countries. Also arouse a lot of trouble, make our intellectual society give so many bad comments. They don't believe that the party can do some good things. But if you're facing so many interest groups, they cannot follow. What you can do? You only can use the central power. The central power, you know, it's somehow need more explanation because that it's a totally different with a Western-centric ideology. So the discourse is different. So nowadays, the central more emphasize the every level's party group or party leader. You need to take the responsibility to change. And so even that now when China try to regenerate the collective economy, it's not exact public economy, but it's a semi-public economy in countryside. For that, you may have the comprehensive ecological economy, not by individual private households or private enterprise. You need to have set up, and even nowadays the state-owned enterprises still belong to some interest group. So you need to reset up a kind of economic infrastructure. And so many challenge to make them to try to find a way, jump out from this very severe polluted economic path. So also somehow many difficulties. So I think that is not so easy. I just gave you a very roughly picture, make you understand that when China facing these three big surplus and then they want to change direction, they want to reset up the ecological economy and whatever. It's just a very roughly picture. If you do want to know the details, maybe that you can organize a small group and then set up a kind of joint research, and then we can help you to know the details. Anyway, thank you.
One small question for Professor Wen. Do they use the rhetoric of the Green New Deal in China? And for this, thank you so much for a very, very stunning presentation. We actually began discussing debt in our eco-sufficiency book in 2009. And one debt there which we identified, which you didn't, I think, but maybe useful, is another form of intergenerational debt, which is actually based on ecological entropy, and that is, of course, climate change, which is going to impact on the future generations.
It's a very critical issue. It's because of the global warming to make this, China is in the coastal area, it's a terror. And then China, according to this 5-year plan, they set up these industries based on the city group, means that the whole area urbanized. And then to allocate these industries means that double your pollution. And then global warming move this pollution up to the north. And then when to the north, there is a yellow soil plateau, there's a high plateau. And then Mongolian plateau, and then to block this pollution just at above Beijing. That is also very big issue to make Beijing authority change direction. So the global warming is really a kind of bad thing, but it's a yes, opportunity for China to change their direction. Good question.
But the phrase Green New Deal, is it being used in China? Green New Deal?
I'm not sure because I haven't read such kind of documents. Okay. Anyway, good question. Finish?
Okay, with a note on new Green Deal and climate change, we go to lunch and then we'll be back at 2 o'clock. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to our 4 speakers and all the members of the audience. Thank you.